Hi guys, welcome back. Okay, so now that we've created an API, an application programming interface where other programs can call to your endpoints, your URLs to get information or to update or create information. So we have a database full of books. Now we want to show them to the user and also let the user create and update the books eventually. So here we have a wireframe that we're going to use to display all the books. You can imagine it might be part of a book club app or something like that. So we have a table with all of the books listed. Each row is a book itself with all the details. We also have a page here that shows the details of an individual book. So if you look at this wireframe, you might be a little intimidated, but we're really just going to do things we've done before and put it all together. So each of these pages is actually like an assignment that you've done before. So let's take a look at that. All right, so the first one is that Grace Hopper receipt assignment, right? You were given a whole bunch of hard-coded variables to display on the page. And at that point, we passed in what's called the model, not to be confused with the models we now have to represent our books in the database, but this view model, right, that Spring uses to bind variables to your JSP page. So just a reminder about that. I don't know why they call it a model. It does lead for some confusion, but hey, there you have it. So you've done that before. Now we just need to have, instead of hard-coded information, we'll have a whole book object that we're going to pass into the page. The other assignment that you did that reflects that first page there is the Fruity Loops assignment. So for this one, you had to loop over a list, an array list of item objects. So that kind of sounds like something you can do now, right? If you can call the database to get all of the books in the form of an array list of book objects, then you are going to be able to loop over it and show it on the page. So before we get started with that, let's just look at what you're going to need to add into this book project to get you guys started. So first of all, we're going to create a new controller called Book Controller, right? Going forward, you will not need to have an API controller. We only did that because we didn't want to add everything in at once. So we had you guys create an API just so you could use CRUD operations with the database. But going forward, you'll only need that one controller, in this case, a book controller. Now, in huge projects, you probably will have multiple controllers for different classes, different things in the database as projects grow larger and larger. The convention is to have a controller for each one of those models. You guys don't need to do that. Your projects are going to be fairly small, but you can if you want to. So we're just going to use this one book controller to route things. Now, notice it is an @controller annotation, right? So the difference between the REST controller and our regular @controller is that the REST controller will respond with raw data, so JSON or string literals like we did in prior assignments. Now an @controller is going to respond by rendering a JSP page, right? So we actually will return a string that is the name of that JSP file for it to be rendered. So just some review. So in addition to adding a new controller, we're also going to make sure that we have all of those JSP dependencies that we needed. So if you go down to your POM XML file, we should add that the two dependencies that you need for JSP pages, right? The Jasper and then also for JSTL tags, make sure you have those there. Just a little reminder. You're also going to create inside of your web app folder down here a web.inf folder as well as your index.jsp. I've already have those created. So what we're going to do first is we're going to test this page. I'm just going to make a small route and make sure I can render everything properly. I always say test early and test often. Okay, so I have typed in a route here. I've used get mapping annotation instead of request mapping annotation. You can use either, it's up to you. And now I'm gonna make a method to render that index page. And that's really it. You'll notice I have hard-coded this 2 here. We're going to replace that later. But for now, that's good enough. So I'm going to save that and let's run it. I actually have it running already. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, I'll refresh. Test. Yay. Good to go. Okay. So we know that it's connected. What we're going to do now is let's look at our wireframe to sort of see what our goal is. So for this bottom page here, we want to show an actual book from our actual database. Now, which book do we want to show? It looks like in the wireframe, we want to be able to click on the title of the book and go to a URL that looks like this, books / whatever the ID is, right? So if you remember back from the spring intro section, we have these path variables, right? So this is presumably going to be an actual ID of one of these books. So it can be anything. So it's going to be a variable there. So you're definitely going to need a path variable for that. Oops. And I'm just going to call it book ID. Now, if you remember from our JSP section, we need to add that annotation for path variable. And it has to match the name of the parameter that you put here. Yeah. And then we need to give it a type. In this case, our type for ID comes from our model, right? The type of ID that it has is a long. And I can call this whatever I want, but I might as well keep it the same, book ID. Awesome. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test. So as soon as I get that, I should be able to print it here. Okay. And then we're going to print that variable, book ID. And that's good. So it should run to the page. It should also print the book ID in the console. So let's take a look. All right, I'm going to refresh. It still says test, awesome. And it should print the number 2, and it does. Awesome. So that's good news. So now what we want to do is actually get the book out of the database. For your controller, you need to, just like we had in our API controller, we need to import or use dependency injection to have access to our service, right? And a little shortcut you can do in place of making the variable and then also putting it into the constructor is you can just say auto-wired, @auto-wired. It's going to be of type book service. And I will just call it book service. Great. And that should be it. So let's import that. I'm going to do Shift-Command-O. And there we got that auto-wired annotation. And again, what that's doing is it does your dependency injection for you. It saves you a few lines of code. Okay, cool. So now we have our book service. I'm going to just set a variable for a book. And I'll say book, and then I'll just call it book. And we're going to set it to book service dot, and then it'll give me all of these ones that I have here. So find book is what we called it, right? And I'm just going to give it the book ID. Awesome. Great. For now, I've hard-coded. When I'm typing it into the browser, I'm just typing in the number 2. Eventually, we'll click on those links to be able to get there. But for now, this is good. And it looks like I have not imported the book class. So I'm Shift-Command-O, and it's right there. That's my book. You'll notice sometimes that Java actually has other classes that are named the same things as yours. Be careful when you hit this window and choose carefully, make an educated guess as to which one you should import. Okay, awesome. So now that I have a book, great. Hopefully I have that book. I test as often as I can. So I'm going to do a little sysout statement here to just print the book itself. So I have a variable book here. I'm not using it. Now I will. And I'm just checking to make sure I'm getting that book from the database. Okay, nothing happened there. That's fine. And sure enough, in our console, we have the book ID, and then we have a book object. It's really the address of that object. Awesome. So now I've verified that the book came back, and now I have to actually put it into my page. So in order to have this model and add that book to the view model, I do have to pass it into my method here. So typically that's actually the first thing I do. So model, oops, extra comma there. This is the type, which is a model, and I'm calling it model. So make sure we do that import, Shift Command O, got that model there. Now I do model dot, and all of the methods show up. So model dot add attribute. Awesome. We're going to get at the name of book. Oddly enough. So again, this string is how it will refer to the value that I pass in here on my JSP page. So as long as this matches what's in my JSP page, then we're good to go. If I call it a banana, then in my JSP page, which I have here, I would have to call it banana. So we're going to test it, and I'm not even going to use my cout tag. I'm just going to go really raw, which is not safe if you want to protect inputs, you want to sanitize your inputs. But for now, I'm just going to put banana there. I'm driving that home to make sure that you guys understand which part of it needs to match which other part. Okay, so great. So in my controller, I had banana here. So I'm using that same one here, and hopefully it will print that book onto the page. Nice. It gave us the address. Now it'll be up to you how to show it on the page. So we have this banana. It's actually a book object right now. I'll just change it back to book. Go back to my controller, change this to book. Okay, so we're going to add a title there. Let's see what happens. Refresh. And it grabbed the title. Pretty awesome. Okay. Just remember, it's really a good idea to print something on the page before you start doing other stuff. Like I printed the book first, and it's just going to be all ugly, like the address or whatever. Same with doing a for loop. Once you get all of the books, you want to see that they're coming into the page first. And in fact, let's just do that real quick. So if I wanted to do the same thing, just like I have book, let's make a variable for an array of books. Right. And I'll just call it books. Book service dot. Oh, get all books. I called it something different. Okay. Great. Book service dot get all books, and it looks like I have an imported array list. So let's do that. Shift Command O. Awesome. So now I have all the books. I'm also going to add another attribute, books. Now I wouldn't probably do this in the same page, but just to show you guys how you might do this. So that's going to be called books. Also getting the actual list here, books, and let's just see if it renders on the page. So first we got to actually put it there. So let's put another little variable here, and it's going to look really ugly. But this way I know it's actually getting there. Nope, just books. And I should see a very ugly list of book objects. Let's take it for a test run. Nice. That's exactly what I was expecting. So I expect everybody to test like this first before you go in and do some crazy for loops and whatnot. All right. Have fun with it. I wish you luck.